What's up, Simonics, and welcome to a new Ionic tutorial. Today we're finally getting into Supabase, the open source Firebase alternative. I'm sure some of you have heard about this, some perhaps not, and the only thing I found about Supabase in terms of tutorials and guide was React and Vue and other JavaScript frameworks, but not Angular and Ionic. So here we go. Today we're gonna build an application based on Supabase as our backend, including registration, sign up, protecting pages with a guard, all CRUD functionality with the SQL database, and on top of that also a logic to implement real-time updates, because it's a bit different from Firebase on how you're gonna handle this, but we're gonna add everything in this tutorial. I recommend you also check out the link below the video to the written version on DevDectic, because we got quite a lot of code in this video, and of course check out the Ionic Academy, my place to help you with everything Ionic. Once you've done this, we're ready for the video and we can get started with our Supabase Ionic Angular tutorial. Okay, so let's get started with our application. First of all, a blank new Ionic application, and then we install the Supabase JS client package. We will use this to connect with our database, and for our Ionic application we only need 2 additional pages, a login page and a list for all the to-dos that we want to generate, a service to interact with Supabase, and finally also a guard so we can put in everything that we got from Firebase, so to make sure our routes are authenticated and secured. Now let's go to Supabase. I already created my account. You can create it using GitHub sign-in, and then let's hit a new project. I will use my organization and I will call this product video database password. Can I just use some string that I got in here? Perhaps like, I don't know. Yeah, that's a great protection string. I guess this will, yeah. Okay, it's okay. They let me pick it. I will choose the nearest to me and then hit next. The next step is to extend your database. Usually this step should be pretty fast. And now this takes like 2 minutes. So meanwhile, we can already check out the application. Are we allowed to see anything while it's, no, it's just, oh, we're actually, no, that's not enough for us. We will check back in a second. Let's go back to our Ionic application. We started everything and we can already open our environment, in which we're gonna add 2 properties. We will add a Supabase URL and a Supabase key. This is like the connection from Firebase. Usually for Firebase you have a huge object. For Supabase we only need the URL to the project and an anonymous key, which can be used while the user is not authenticated. On top of that, we can check out our app routing, which got all the new entries. We can remove the home entry, and we will also remove the home page in a second. We will just keep login list, and we will redirect to login normally. Also, no, not for login, but for the list, we can already use the can load guard. And we pass in our auth guard, which comes with a default implementation for can load that just returns true. So we can already add this and in the end implement this service. Let's check back. Great, we're already finished. So we can check out all the different sections in here. We got the table editor, which just shows the tables, the authentication tab, in which we can directly go to the settings, because my site URL is currently this. In the future, or if you use this in a real production application, you might use a universal link in here to directly open your email if you have email confirmations enabled. If you don't have email confirmations, it doesn't matter. And since those are enabled by default, I just want to have the link open my local app for now. In the future, we could also talk about all the rest in here. SQL, we will get to this in a second. API, just the description. Databases, our tables, and all the configuration, but we don't have any tables yet. So let's go to our environment and find our URL. And there we go. That is the host, the connection info. Let's put this into here. And where is the auth setting? Nope. That wasn't the auth setting. This is the API setting. This is the key for Anon public users, and that's the one we're going to paste in here. You shouldn't use this key inside an Ionic application because basically people could get to that information. Just think of it like that. And therefore, we will only use a key like this in our application. We got this with Firebase as well. The real authentication and security always happens on the server side, and that's also the case with Supabase. Now, there's actually somewhere a cool functionality to start our to-do applications, so I don't have to do all the typing. There we go. They got some cool snippets. This one creates a to-dos table, stores user ID, task is complete, insert that with default time, and also enables some row level security, so only people who created the actual to-dos can read their to-dos. That means we don't need any additional filtering or logic on the client side, and we just got this. So let's hit run right here, and run success, no returns. Okay, fine for me. As long as our to-dos table is created. Okay, we got our table. That was pretty easy. And now we can actually, I think, get started with the application to fill that. We are done with the routing, we're done with the environment, and now we need to create our CRUD service for Supabase. There's actually a thing that I wanted to show you, and that is to generate a TypeScript interface based on your application. So they got this somewhere inside of their documentation, and you can use the Swagger 2TS, because if you access your project correctly, where's the URL again? I think this is, actually the URL looks kind of strange to me. Let's check REST v1, and then the API key should be our key. Then we can find inside here. Let's hit copy. Then we should get the Swagger API documentation if I didn't make any typos in here. Let's see, it takes a while. But the URL so far look good to me, actually. Actually, I don't know why the name is so strange. Actually, this should be our name, or was that the name that I used? No, that looks more like the real name. No API key found in the request. What about that key that I added in here? No route. Okay, well, let's just do this in the end again. Actually, also, I think that I have to change my environment, because this is only the database URL, and we should really have the real Supabase URL in here. That looks way better. So make sure you go to API and use that URL. I think that works better. Okay, back to our Supabase service, and I can already run Ionic serve. We will get back to the Swagger stuff in the end. For now though, we're gonna implement the CRUD functionality, and first of all we need to establish a connection between our Ionic application and Supabase. So we're gonna inject nothing, we will just import something. We will import the create client and the Supabase client types and the user types from Supabase. Now we can create our Supabase instance. We will keep track of it in here. Thanks for bringing up my preview in the wrong place. We're gonna add the Supabase client, so we got all the nice typings, and then initialize the Supabase client by calling the according function that we just imported. Create client, passing in the Supabase URL and the Supabase key. And because we got that inside of our environment, it's pretty easy if you select the right one and not the wrong, like I did, and the Supabase key. This is everything that we need to create our connection. Once again, this key is only an anonymous key, so it won't do a lot of harm. What I found so far to be helpful is to include some options to perform an auto refresh for your token, and also to persist your session. We will then also see the session information inside our local storage. That is one thing that I haven't completely figured out. You can actually use your own local storage engine, and on a device I would actually rather like to use Ionic storage. But if we use Ionic storage, all the calls become async. And therefore, we might have to change some kind of implementation. So we will just use the web storage. That isn't perfect, but I'm sure in the future we will find a better way for this. This is just getting started with Supabase, really the first time trying it out. Now, the problem is we immediately think about how we're going to handle our user authentication, and there are functions for this. So the first one is to listen to the Supabase on-auth state changed. That is quite nice. The only problem with this is it only triggers if you're really authenticated. But if you initialize a user object like we usually do with this, so a behavior subject which we initialize with null, there's actually no way to check if it's null because it's the initial value of the behavior subject, or it is null because we didn't receive any auth state change. This will become a bit more clear in the end, but the main problem is really that, well, you could say null, the user is not authenticated, but the problem is it will definitely be, the first value will be null. And this triggers at some time. So it's really hard to use this as an observable or any kind of way. And therefore I got actually two ways to handle this. So first of all, we can check in here if the event is equal to signed in. And in that case, we can set our current user to next session.user. On the other hand, we could just set the current user to false. There we go. And that's the general logic. Let's keep it for this like this for now. And I will add this so we can actually track when we see an event. But usually more interesting for you is how to use sign up or how to use sign in. Well, just like with Firebase, this is really super easy. For the sign up, we just need to use async because those calls return a promise. Let's call this whatever. It should return error data and await this dot Supabase auth. And then we got something like sign up, where we could pass in our email and password credentials. If we want to make this quite easy, let's just create an object that contains both of this, and then we can use our credentials in here. Now the problem is that this promise, I see we encounter a lot of promises, or a lot of problems and promises. The problem here was that the sign up promise is never rejected. It is always fulfilled. And therefore, if you want to handle this inside your login page, it's quite, well, it's not the perfect way to handle a login. Let's quickly go here and create like something like a sign up function, inject it, private Supabase service, Supabase service. And then you're just gonna call Supabase service, whatever. Should be an object, right? Come on, I messed up myself. Anyway, the problem, if we now handle then, and we always get back data, we would now have an ugly check if data.error is set, and in the else case, I feel like the promise should resolve or reject. And therefore, I simply wrapped it inside a new promise. Let me show you how. I will replace this line with this. So instead of using just the promise from the sign up, I just returned a new promise and I check if we get an error, I will call reject and otherwise resolve. This is a beta version, a very early version of Supabase, so perhaps they might adopt something like this if they check out this video. I think that would be helpful to reject or resolve the promise. And now we can do basically the same. I will actually just copy this for the sign in, email, password, and now we're gonna just call sign in, and that's it. We can also create our sign out, which we will trigger later, but for now, let's do this. Supabase auth sign out. I really enjoy that everything's under auth and easily findable. This returns something. We could also await this. Let's await this. We're cool. Await, sign out. And once the sign out is done, we should also destroy any active subscription. We could handle this ourselves with Angular logic, keep track of all the subscription, but there's actually a function, and I enjoyed that we could call get subscriptions. That was always something I found a bit tricky with Firebase, to find any open connection after a user signs out. So I guess they also felt like this, and they created this get open subscriptions function, and then we can go through each subscription and call Supabase remove subscription sub. Actually, I don't know why we need two of them. Maybe we could merge them into one, like remove all open subscriptions. Should be quite easy to implement this. And then afterwards, we will call the router. Did we inject the router? I don't think so. Private router. To send the user back to the login. Navigate by URL to whatever. Okay, that's a good start. Let's implement our login so we actually see something on screen. I know you hate it if we implement something for 20 minutes and don't see anything. So get started with a login module, reactive forms module. We will keep this short because I think we've built a login page often enough. And therefore, yeah, that was my stupid try to implement this. Inside our ng on init, we're gonna create a credentials form, just like we've done. Like, I feel like I can't count how many times we've did this in our videos. I will bring in the constructor with all that we need. Let me show you. Oh, can I not get everything? Just get everything. We need the form builder for the reactive form. We need an alert controller for alerts, the router, loading to show some loading, and our Supabase service. On top of that, we need a little helper function, or we don't need to, but it's nice to show our alert in case something goes wrong. And then the login is really, it's that easy if you implement everything inside the service. You just need to present your loading, or don't present it if you don't want to inform your users that something's going on. And then call our service functionality sign in with the value of our reactive form. If there's a success, we can now easily handle this and don't need any more ifs or else statements in here. In the case of a fulfilled promise, we will dismiss the loading and navigate to our inside area, and in the error case, we can just display the error. That was the whole reason why I had this. Otherwise, we would have the if switch in here, and I really wanted to keep that logic inside the service. The sign up now is basically the same. Only thing changed is that we now call sign up, and also after a sign up, we can't immediately call the sign in because you still need to confirm your email unless you toggled inside the auth settings this switch to disable email confirmations. Then you could even just directly call the sign in. Once we get this, we can also open our HTML, and I will keep this as short as possible. Login form of our form group credentials connected. If this is too fast, check out the link below the video once again to the written article. And we got the two input fields, form control email, form control password. This one's the login disabled while the form isn't valid, and the sign up could actually also be disabled. You could also be disabled. And on click, we want to call our sign up. We will really just keep everything in this one view. Let's see. We had an event signed in. Yeah, I know why we are signed in. Simply because I already got this inside my local storage. Let me quickly remove this, and then no further event is called. All right, let's call simon@devtactic.com, password a super safe password. Let's try the login. Okay, login failed, no user found with that email. That is good news. And let's hit sign up. And please confirm your email now. And there we go, we got the confirm your sign up email. This template couldn't be changed inside Supabase, but I will just hit confirm, which brings me back to our login page. And now we see event signed in even directly. So that would have worked, but let's try to log in here and let's see what happens. We get the event signed in, great, but no further information. Perhaps I should have logged the session as well, which is a bit more interesting. So let's do this again. The problem right now is that we can access everything and we don't have a sign out. So I will just remove my auth token in here as well again and go back to the login. So now for the login, putting in my credentials once again. And then after login, we see event, signed in, session, information, and the actual user object. So everything so far worked. We were able to implement the authentication real quickly. And we see one new user inside our database. Cool. But there's a lot to do, especially when we want to make sure that the application is secure in the end. But for now, I think because we used persist session true, that's the reason why we see this information inside our local storage. And again, I would like to use Ionic storage in the future. Perhaps I will figure it out somehow. Next step after the login is to work and create to-dos inside our to-do list. To do so, we first of all implement a bit of logic. Now, what you need to understand about Supabase is that once you run a query against your database, it returns a promise with that data. With Firebase, you usually have the real-time connection to the database, so we need to figure out a slightly different way for this. There is a way to use real-time data, and that is to listen to database changes. And we will combine both approaches. I think that is the way we should handle it, but I'm not 100% sure because I don't know. So we're gonna create another behavior subject to-dos, which we will set to an empty array. So we just gonna work with that local data. We will once retrieve the data from the database and then work with the local data. As far as I know, no, I will keep that for later. Once we're signed in here in our function, we will now create two new functions. We will call them load to-dos. And we will call them handle to-dos changed. And we're just gonna call both of them when our user is authenticated in this case. Okay, to load the to-dos, we can now get into the client SDK from Supabase. I always want to say Firebase. I'm sure at some point I did already say Firebase instead of Supabase. I'm sorry for that. Now, to load the to-dos, we're gonna create a query. Query equals await, and then this start Supabase from. So we need to put in the name of our table. I recommend you put this as a const up here because we will use it in other places and I don't want to mess up with a string, so I'll just keep it like this. And we can always be sure we're using the right string in case we change the database name or something. And from our database, we now want to select everything. I just want to have everything. As you can see, you could create real complex logic in here. Where's the examples? So for a select, you can put in, where is it? You can select just specific properties. You could add more queries. Really, basically everything that you can do with those filters. We will just use it like this because we're happy if we can write and read data for today. So this query should return some data. And once we got the data, we will emit this to our to-dos. Now, because this is a private behavior subject, we need a way to return the data as well. But first query dot, I think body and data is kind of similar to me. The result here, what really just almost similar. Let's check if we can get a result already. Yeah, we haven't injected into our list page this service. Maybe we could even call the service right inside the app component. So really in your first page, in our case, login is the first page, but if you have the initialize logic for the Supabase inside the service, you need to make sure that it's called right in the beginning. And that's the place where you inject it. Private Supabase service. That should be enough to trigger, even from the list page, the constructor of our service. There we go, we got the event session, and that's the result of our query. We don't get any data or body back. We could actually do a little manual trick here. So let's add a row. Can I add a user in for key user ID? I don't know what my user ID is. Can I just save it like this? Or will you? Yeah, you're gonna complain. I knew. Can somebody tell me what my user ID is? Should be here. Let's try this one. Could work. Cancel, I'll use this one. Okay, nice, I got data in my database. And now let's hit refresh. And this comes back as a nice entry in our database. And this array is now exactly what I want to use to populate the behavior subject. And that's what we do in here. So now the list page can subscribe to the to-dos. Actually not to the to-dos because it's private. I read that using the behavior subject allows you to emit new values, so you should keep the real behavior subject functionality in the service and instead return something like this. Get to-dos should return this dot to-dos. Nope, this to-dos as observable. So the outside people calling this can just get the observable version, which can't be changed and could only be used to subscribe to the data. On top of that, we should go to our list page and on the list page, get the to-dos from the to-do service, from the Supabase service. Can't you do this automatically? Really? Shouldn't that work? Let's call this, maybe let's call it items, but should get the to-dos from the Supabase service. Well, no more complaints. We're fine. Before we wrap up and jump between 5 different files, let's create the CRUD functionality. I think that's more straightforward and we can then focus on the UI implementation. Let me bring in a few more functions. So we can load our to-dos. How can we add to-dos? Well, we can just call Supabase from, which is once again selecting the database, and then insert with a new to-do. I added a comment here because the task that we add inside the object needs to be 3 characters. I found this in the query somewhere here. Right here. So the task was defined as at least 3 or actually 4 characters. So you could have some error handling, but I will leave that to you for later. And what I found pretty cool is you can directly, without any promises or any observable logic, get the user ID from the Supabase or user object. So that is our user ID for the new to-do, and boom, there we go. Now, how can we remove and update to-dos? Well, it's really just a call to the Supabase package. You just need to know what you want to do. Once again, in both cases, you select your database. In the first case, you call delete, and you're gonna add the match to find the right entry. And for update, well, you call update. I just want to update the complete field and the match again with the ID of the database table, column, row of the row. That's it. All right. The problem now is that we only get the to-dos once. If we add data, change data, remove data, we would have to call this function again. I feel like, yeah, we could do that, but we can actually also listen to the changes of our Supabase database. And we could do this by using from on our to-do database and using on. The database event which you would like to receive updates for, or you can use the special wildcard. Yeah, I always want to have the special thing. So we go with a star and then we get back a payload. Let's log out the payload. Perhaps we can see this once in action. If I just create something manually inside the database again, I will copy this value and a new row, manual task. Okay, that's all the logic from before. Now let's hit save here. Did I save something? Oh yeah, are we actually calling handle to-dos changed? Okay, we did so. But I fell for the usual problem. I didn't call subscribe, so I can do all the fun again. Okay, application is ready. We're gonna add something, and then we get back this payload in here. What we get in here is first of all an event type, and that's also what we're gonna use to create different kind of logic. So payload event type equals delete, and then else if whatever, else if this is a delete, if it's an insert, or if it's an update. We can handle those three cases and just do the change locally. I will bring in the different cases because I guess we're already at 30 minutes and we haven't created the list yet. So this shouldn't look too hard. Oh, did we forget to implement a to-do interface? I know why we forgot about that, because the damn Swagger 2 TypeScript didn't work out as expected. So our interface is just the information of the database ID, inserted, task complete, task user ID. The service is way more complex than I wanted to make it. I don't know why. Perhaps I should have left the user authentication out, but I really want to have it to show you everything. Anyhow, if we got a delete event, we can get the old item from payload.old. In this case here, for example, we had an insert, then it's inside new, and I think it's pretty clear what we're gonna do. For delete, we will filter the current value of our to-dos, filter out the old item, and emit the array once again to our to-dos. For the insert case, we'll also go through our items, or actually we don't need to go through them. We can just grab the new item and use all the values from before plus our new item. That's it. The update case is a bit more challenging. We once again also need to go through our values and check if the item is equal to the updated item ID. Then we're gonna replace it and re-return it anyway. And we set the new value. So this function looks a bit complicated, but actually it really isn't. We're just checking the three cases so we can perform everything locally. And I can promise you we're almost done with our service. We will handle the user stuff in the end when we talk about our the guard that we want to build, but for now we're gonna really hit our list page so we can finally see the list on screen. Let's actually do this right now here. We're gonna start by adding another sign out button so we can test out some functionality. Sign out should be pretty easy because we implemented the sign out as far as I know, so that's it. And within the Ion content, I wanted to use an Ion list and then a sliding item. So I should have a nice completion for this. Ion item sliding, ng4 let to do of items. And because this is an observable, we're going to use the Angular async pipe. The label, let's see if we get code completion now. Of course not. Why should we? To-dos, yeah, to-dos. Okay, couldn't we say this is an observable? Observable with a to-do array. Perhaps that will make us happy. Let's see. Do I get code completion now? Yeah, I do. So now we can log out our task. We can also, just for showing some information, log out to-do dot. Come on, now you're gone? Oh man, I was just falling in love with Visual Studio once again. Now I don't know what it was called. Inserted at. and using the Angular date pipe short should be fine. Let's comment out those so we can, that was too much. Just those, and we should finally be able to see something. Let's go to the list page. We don't have any guards in place, and there we see finally our guards, our elements in action. I'm so happy. Okay, that was a big step for us. So we got the connection, we're loading the data with our promise here, with our query, and we're setting it to our local behavior subject, so we can always emit new values and locally change everything. We're listening to the changes, so there's really no information that we could miss. We have to talk about those real-time changes in the end again in terms of security, but for now, let's just be happy about it. All right, our Ion item options. I will bring in both of them. Ion item options. Let's do this. So what we want to do is we want to have a delete function, so we can trigger our delete. And we also want to have a toggle function to toggle the completion state. Both of them will get the full to-do object from our iteration, and the toggle function also checks if the to-do is already complete to change the color and the icon, but nothing really fancy. I also wanted to add this checkbox icon into the regular item, so in here we can also check if it's complete to show it. Now, to add a new to-do, we might actually also need a button, perhaps. So let's add a fab as well to create a to-do. And then we just need to fill in all the information in here. Delete and toggle done is pretty easy. The only thing we need to do in this case is to call our service, remove our item with the ID, or update the item and just toggle the is complete. To create a new to-do, I just wanted to do something easy. So in that case, I will use the alert controller with an input. You could also create a details view. I really don't care. New to-do, inputs, and if we hit add, we call our Supabase service add, which adds the user ID to the new task, and then we're basically done. We already got the connection, so let's try new task, and it works. It works because we're getting the payload after the database changed, and we're adding the new data in our local behavior subject. Let's try to toggle the task, and that works as well. If we check out the database, we see false, 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 true, and we could also hit delete now. It is removed from here and from here as well. So all the CRUD functionality now is already working. And now the last missing piece for this whole tutorial is our guard. I could still access the list right now. That's not really what I want to have. So let's open our guard, and we can really get rid of the rest. We kind of rushed through this, but it's just using the service right now. Really, this part is the most easiest part. We're just using the service, and I think then we've done quite a good job. If the controller of our template has really no further job besides getting the data and routing through with the service. Okay, Auth Guard and Supabase service. We can basically remove everything in here. I really don't like all of this in here. So I came up with a logic in the past, and I will import this as well now because, oh no, what did I do? Can we just hit all missing imports? No, not this. Okay, let's talk about this in a second because we haven't implemented, we actually got the current user. Oh, I think we forgot to create the current user get functionality, right? Get current user, return this dot current user as observable. Same reason like before, only returning the observable to the Authentication Guard. Where are all my filter, map, and take functionalities? Here they come. And now, so we're gonna filter out the initial null value because a behavior subject has an initial value. Then we're going to take 1 because otherwise the observable doesn't complete, and then we can check if the user is authenticated or not. Now, the problem is if the user is not authenticated in Guard, I will show you what's happening right now. Okay, so we got the Guard. We already applied it to the route before. What happens now is that list loads and nothing else happens because we don't even reach that step. The reason is simple. We got that initial null value and afterwards nothing is changed because on auth state change is only called when the user is logged in or registered and not for the initial event. That is a problem, and I really tried to find a decent way to fix this. I'm not sure if this is the way to go, but I created this load user functionality in which we just manually try to load the user. Await this Supabase auth user. Now, user usually actually doesn't return a promise. I don't know why I put a await in here. So that should be maybe we could also leave this out. Let's see. We will do some live testing as well. If we found a user, we will also do what we did here. We will emit the value to our observable, to our behavior subject, and in the other case, we will emit false because setting false to it fixes the problem. False isn't null in JavaScript, and then we get into the rest of that functionality. Now, let's see if this works. If we now access the list, we see user is null and in Guard false. In that case, it works because we emit this false value now to our object. Could I remove await in here? Maybe, we will see. Let's give it a try. List could work as well. Let's try to sign in. Okay, that still works. That's good. I can still do my work in here. Let's try to refresh that page. And we see, once again, a nice problem. Because the user is null, the user wasn't immediately loaded. This line here didn't work correctly. So let's try to change it with an await. And let's call list now. Now it works. So if we use await here to await the result of this, which is usually not really a promise anyway, so I'm kind of confused about that part. It's just loading from the web storage, which is a regular task and should immediately return our user, as we can already see him in here. We can also manually get that value in a regular kind of way. But yeah, I don't know why we have to use it like this, but that was my fix for now to use the session. Also, I guess it's required to call persist session with this logic to make everything work together. Now, if we log out, we also see the signed out event, but once again, if I just go to list, we don't have any other event. We can only rely on the stored information. So that is perhaps something that will change in the future. But for now, we got a Supabase application with CRUD functionality. We can write new task. Hello world. We can mark them complete. We can remove them. We got authentication in place, registration. So all the basic stuff that you need with Supabase. Alright, and that's it for today's tutorial on using Supabase as a backend with your Ionic Angular application. I hope you could follow. I hope you enjoyed this overview about all the basic functionalities like the authentication, the database integration, the real-time functionality, and everything that we covered. If you liked the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to see more about this, also leave a note in the comment. I will definitely create a new video on the general stuff like should you use Supabase, comparison to Firebase, and all the security aspects that we didn't cover today in a future vlog episode. But for today, that's it with this basic tutorial. If you want to see more about Ionic, also of course check out my Ionic Academy, ionicacademy.com, and I would love to see you as a new member on everything Ionic. So, see you next time and happy coding, Simon.